Welcome. My name is Rosie Wijenberg. I am a registered professional biologist. My specialty is ecology, specifically forest ecology, specializing in disturbance, primarily insect and disease. So obviously with all that kind of stuff, climate change comes into everything that I do. Before I start, I'm going to be talking about, well, first I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm going to be talking about the bugs in our forest that are killing trees and the new realities that we're facing because our forests are very challenged by drought, by fire. So climate change is wreaking havoc with their systems that allow them to access water. And when these trees are starved for water, they're not able to defend themselves against insect attack. So I will get a little bit more into that. And then fires also are a big part to play in a cycle of insects. So climate change is going to play a lot into everything that I talk about. The other thing, the bugs that I'm talking about today, these are not bugs that are, aliens to our environment. These are hardworking parts of ecosystems that previously were not necessarily tree killers, primary tree killers, or rarely tree killers. And we're facing new realities that insects that were once benign decomposers or, would create nice openings in a forest where there was disease, so taking out diseased trees, that these bugs are now becoming epidemics across the landscape. And the mountain pine beetle, which I'm assuming everybody is familiar with, was a very dramatic escalation of insect that those bugs, which are native to British Columbia, were always primary tree killers. And as most of you probably know, with logging practices of monocultures of mature stands and then warming winters, that created a prime environment for those beetles to take off and just kill pine everywhere. The bugs that we're dealing with right now, that I'll be talking about today, are not primary tree killers and were not primary tree killers in the past. So they are less aggressive than mountain pine beetle in general. So why we are here is this site had a Douglas fir beetle infestation a few years ago, and it was likely brought in firewood. So how many of you are property owners from around here or anywhere? Yeah, so you're a big part of my target audience for today. So one of the ways, and for everybody, one of the ways that these beetles can move onto our property is in firewood. So I'm going to show you what that looks like so that you can spot firewood that is infested. So the important thing is trying to get firewood without bark. If that's not possible, just making sure that all of the bark is destroyed by the spring. And that will become apparent as I talk about the life cycle of these. So there was a Douglas fir beetle infestation here, likely came on in firewood, but there are Douglas fir beetle infestations all up in the mountains above. You can see it from quite far away. It looks like red patches of trees. That has been getting a bit less in recent years, but it was quite bad for about 4 or 5 years there. So even if you're not bringing in firewood, those beetles could still come onto your property. So Douglas fir beetle is a bark beetle. It is in the same genus as mountain pine beetle. So it is a bark beetle. These are beetles that bore under the bark. They're little. I have some brochures that people can grab so they can take a look at them. They're little. They look like little pigs to me. They're a little brown and a little bit red. A female will bore into the tree. And then if she's successful, like if the tree does not pitch her out, like push her out, she will then send off signals to males and other females that say, hey, this is a great tree, and then the beetles will mass attack the tree. It takes a varying amount of bugs to kill the tree, but it's generally about 1,200 beetles. Once that tree is full, the males will send out a signal that says, this tree is full, go to a different tree. So this life cycle is annual. So the bugs fly around April. It's temperature dependent, April and May, and they go through to September. They are inside the tree through the winter. Once the tree has been attacked successfully, that is a dead tree. So this would happen spring, summer. The beetle comes in, it mass attacks the tree. That tree is now a dead tree. So it happens really, really fast. So what that looks like is the tree will be green to start, and it may have like lots of little tiny holes with resin, little resin coming through. If it's a big resin pour, like if it's a lot of resin, generally that's the tree pushing out the beetle. But lots of little resin, you may see boring dust where the beetle's actually bored in, so a little sawdust around the holes. And generally it can happen in the fall, depending if it's really dry, but generally by the next spring, the needles have started to turn red. And so it's like a green red. You can see a tree over here. It's not attacked by Douglas fir beetle. It's actually a different insect that's in it. But you can see there's a little bit of reddish twinge at the bottom. It's like right behind the outhouse. There's a little bit of reddish tinge at the bottom. That's kind of what it would look like if you were seeing Douglas fir beetle. You can look it up online, and it is in my brochures. Those actively turning green, red trees, they are full of bugs. And those bugs will now fly out in the spring and attack. So one of the things that you can do to protect your trees that are around it is to fall that tree, cut down the stump as low as you can to like 30 centimeters, get rid of the bark, because the beetles like to be in the bark as well as under the bark. They are not in the sapwood or the heartwood, and destroy that bark. That is like one of the #1 things you can do. If you have trees that you love and you want to protect them, there is a chemical, it's called MCH. It comes in little packets. Do I have one? I think I have one in a pocket somewhere that I took off another tree. This is from a previous year. They're little bubbles. These unfortunately are not decomposable right now. They are working on this. It's from a company called Synergy. This is a synthetic version of the signal that the males send out to say this tree is full. So when you put this on your tree, you're saying, I am a full tree. It is not 100%. You can put like a couple of these on a bigger tree, like a 60 centimeter DBH one, or a single one on a smaller tree. You can do it in grids. You can make barriers around. They're about $4.50 each. So they're not cheap, and you have to do it every year. So that is a way that you can protect individual trees or areas, but it adds up really, really fast.
Where would you get
Synergy Semiochemicals.
like online?
Yeah, you can order it from them. And I can put my contact and stuff on the brochures that I have if anybody has any questions or whatnot. So the other thing that we can do, and this is not recommended for homeowners because it can be tricky, is we trap for them. And this is done more on large scale, and it's using pheromones to attract them to traps. You have to do it in big openings because it can impact the trees that are around it. So you get what's called spillover. So it's not, you bring in beetles from other places. It can be really useful, but it's not something that I recommend for homeowners in general, unless it's an ideal situation. So your options are basically tree removal, destroying the bark, identifying the trees, obviously, and then MCH to protect your trees. Those are your 2 big tools. So the Douglas fir beetle, as I said, was not a huge primary tree killer. Like every once in a while, it would have a little outbreak. And you would get like, 4 or 5 trees that would die in a little patch. Specifically, if you had like root disease, it would take out things. But what's happening now is our forests are so thirsty. This means that they cannot defend themselves against these beetles. We also had a heat dome a number of years ago, and there's some suspicion that this heat dome has permanently damaged the vascular systems of many of our trees, making trees that are already short of water unable to transport water properly. So those things, that drought, is what is making these trees very susceptible. So that is why this specific area is very susceptible to those beetles, and also disturbance, like just disturbance of their roots, anything that is activity around the trees, you're driving around them, things like that, any kind of stress. So other than the MCH and the removal of trees, preventative care is water and nurturing your trees. giving them space. So we are removing trees here that were infested. That is a disturbance, right? We have wind that is happening here. They love windfall. So the beetles thrive in these disturbed areas. So we've got increased windfall that causes, it provides a very easy tree for these beetles to attack. If you have windfall on your property, fresh windfall, you want to remove that by the following spring if you're having beetle activity. Obviously, windfall is really great ecologically for lots of things. If you don't having beetle problems, no, leave it alone. But what those trees on the ground can do is act as trap trees. That's what we're doing over here with a bunch of green trees that came over as windfall in the winter. Those trees came down in the winter. They are not going to have bugs in them. Now they are on the ground. They are still green. Douglas fir beetle will go to those, hopefully preferring those trees over the standing trees that can defend themselves. So we're going to leave those and we're going to buck them up and take the bark off next spring. So to repeat, preventative is caring for your trees. Water, giving them space, trying to not disturb them too much. All injuries can provide, is another way that the beetles can enter pretty easily. You can do MCH on the trees so that protects, that's these little bubbles. You can remove infested trees. And while I do not recommend trapping for homeowners, you can do what I've just called is a trap tree. So if you have windfall or you have a tree that's down, you can leave it down through the flight season of the beetle, through spring and summer. And then you can use it for firewood over the next winter. You can hopefully collect all the beetles that way. So those are your options for Douglas fir beetle. I would like to show you some signs of it. I can't show you the red tree. We've got good news in that there are no actively Douglas fir beetle infested trees. What we did here is we did a grid of MCH. We did it every 10 square meters for the entire property, and there was a removal of actively infested trees. And between those two things, the Douglas fir beetle is down. We have another problem. And this has been happening all over southern interior. So it's a group of insects called wood borers. Wood borers are both round-headed flat wood borers, which are your longhorn beetles, and flat-headed borers, which are your jewel beetles, which are they look like bullets and they're beautiful. These are decomposers. They are really vital parts of our ecosystems. They are now primary tree killers. And this is happening for a couple reasons. One is that drought. The trees are really vulnerable, can't defend themselves. There's that heat dome that has changed the vascular systems of the trees, and also the fires. So I forgot to mention this with the Douglas fir beetle, but this is true for Douglas fir beetle and for these borers. They build up in fires. So trees that are damaged by fire, trees that are recently dead by fire, these are trees that cannot defend themselves against the bark beetles or the wood borers. They just move in and they have a field day. Their populations raise up and they're able to go now into the other areas. So the Slocan Valley is really vulnerable right now. And what we're seeing here now is wood borers, and you can see it all up and down the valley on the side of the roads. The woodpeckers come in and they just strip the trees and they die really fast. Luckily, the wood borers are doing a really great job in a lot of places, the woodpeckers are doing a really great job of eating a lot of these things. For the wood borers, this is new territory. I'm an entomologist, this is new territory. This is an area of active research, what bugs are actively killing the trees, and what is their mode of action? Why are they moving in so fast? In, say, the Boston Bar area, they're killing ponderosa pine. Here it's Douglas fir, sometimes pine. It depends on the area, so it's different beetles, but in the same groups. For wood borers, it's tree removal. And there's also an option here, and I need to look into it more, but there is potential options to trap. There is not the same problem that there is with the bark beetles, where you get the spillover and the other trees get attacked. That does not happen with trapping for the wood borers. But we don't know how efficacious it is yet. It's like all really new territory. But we're gonna try that here because that is now what is killing the trees here now. So we got rid of the Douglas fir beetle, but we still got another issue. So I've got some stuff to show y'all. And then for whoever wants to walk, I can come and take you to look around a little bit. Your number one thing you're gonna look for signs of these things are the changing of the color of the needles really fast, right? So with the Douglas fir beetle, it happens from fall until spring, and the crown can look really chlorotic and like it's getting really thin. That's pretty much your number one sign that you have an infested tree, if it just changes like that. With the wood borers, they come in a little bit later. They fly in May to August, and for those ones, it happens really fast, but it's bird feeding. So I'll show you a bunch of bird feeding that's happening on the trees here. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a dead tree. Like the woodpeckers might get what's there and then that tree might be okay. But once the woodpeckers get there and they like strip it all and the wood borers get in there and they get all of the basically vascular system of the tree, that tree is dead. It can happen really, really, really fast. So again, it's tree removal. With wood borers, it can be problematic because those borers, they are under the bark, right? But they can go into the tree. You can see the holes though. Right? So if you strip the bark off of those trees, those bugs will die like really fast. So it's tree removal for now and potentially trapping. So I always kind of like, I'm the most depressing person in the room. I'm really sorry to like, our forests are really, really challenged right now. Yeah.
Affect, like, does the bark have to be a certain thickness? Does it affect small trees, big trees, or it has to be, the bark has to be enough, I guess, for a bug to get under it?
This is really a good point. So for Douglas fir beetle, they actually prefer giant old growth trees. They love big, thick bark. They spend the first part of their life cycle underneath the bark. And then later in the season, they spend like the winter and whatnot inside the bark. So that's why it's important that you destroy the bark. The wood borers are under the bark, so or in the tree. So what we're seeing a lot is kind of a double whammy of these. So you'll have Douglas fir beetle that will come and do the initial attack, and that tree's probably already dead. But then you'll have the wood borers come in and they'll just like destroy actually all the Douglas fir beetle galleries in 1 second. And so you're only seeing signs of wood borers, even though the Douglas fir beetle was there too, and may still be in the bark. Like you might not be able to find it. So it's a bit of a double whammy there. They do work together, but we are now also seeing just wood borers kill trees. So, yes.
So that beetle, does it start on the bottom of the tree or does it start halfway or on the top?
That's a really great question too. So Douglas fir beetle generally attacks the top like 2/3 of the tree. So it can be hard to identify. So from looking at the trunk, unless you really know what you're looking for, and then it fills up the whole tree. The wood borers in general, not totally, they tend to start in the bottom and then move their ways up. There was some suspicion that maybe some of the wood borers were actually eating the Douglas fir beetles, like they were attracted to the scent of it. Doesn't seem to be a huge issue. There's still research being done on that, but they definitely are coming into those trees while the Douglas fir beetle is there, and they just eat everything, right? So they're just, it seems like they're just being opportunistic. So you may get less Douglas fir beetle when you're getting wood borers, so you might not have the Douglas fir beetle flying even though it killed the tree. But there's also some suspicion that what might be happening is a bit of partitioning of the niche. So the Douglas fir beetle might move into the bark where it is safe from the wood borers, and just does that anyway, and the wood borers stay under the bark, and so they may be able to actually cohabitate in the tree. Yeah, we're trying to figure it out. So
Not enemies, they're friends.
the wood borers will eat them though.
Oh, they will.
Oh, they'll eat them. And like it's stress trees. Like the main thing is water and stress trees are the ones that are susceptible. The problem is that all our trees are stressed now. And you have this cycle of fire, drought, and insect. So you have a big fire, right? The forests are dry. You have a big fire. Now these beetle populations build up. Now they move into the trees that are next to that are drought-stricken and cannot defend themselves. Now you have a bunch of dead trees there. You have more fire hazard. The good news is that these trees are not, like, after, you know, after a couple years when the needles all fall, those particular trees are not more of a fire hazard. It's mostly for the first year when the needles are on them.
So if you have a property that's got forest fire burn on it,
Yeah.
what's the best thing to do in terms of managing it? Logging, not logging?
I'm not a fan of the clearing all the trees, right? Like, that is not it as far as I'm concerned. You want to try and preserve some of that structure. If you have a burn, trapping may be an option for you. Like, if you've got that kind of, you want to, that is the one instance where, but I would actually come and talk to me. Like, it's something that's a little bit more intensive. And I would protect, for Douglas fir beetle, I would protect my trees with MCH, the ones that I love. That would be number one. And I would be monitoring along the burn just to make sure that my trees are not, like, any trees that are getting hit, those are my new firewood for the next year. And not transporting the firewood off your property unless it's been debarked or it's not containing wood borers. So that movement of firewood is actually a really, really big one. And it's, you know, obviously something that's very difficult to get around in our area because everybody uses firewood. But that ideally, taking the bark off, having debarked firewood, there's people, like, I say this as somebody whose partner was a rogue firewood guy for years and years and years, but like people who actually have their license, like firewooding areas, they are required to take the bark off of firewood before they're delivering it to you. If somebody is delivering you a load with bark, you got to make sure that you're destroying that bark. Like, just err on the side of caution. It may not be infested, but err on the side of caution, destroy that bark. And, you know, if you're feeling good enough, maybe suggest to them that, you know, if they're taking down something and that bark is not coming off easily, that's not great anyway, right? Like, they can leave the bark in the forest. It's not that hard when you're bucking it up and whatnot. So ideally that's the case. I understand that's not possible. Destroy the bark by the spring. So I want to show people a little bit of stuff. So I was lucky that I found some Douglas fir beetle attack tree because I was starting to feel like I wasn't going to be able to show you because all the galleries have been destroyed by the wood borers. So most insects, when they come into these trees, they make the most beautiful galleries. There's so many different kinds of beetles, and you can tell what it is by the gallery that it's making. So you can come take a closer look at this after, but this is a tree that was attacked by Douglas fir beetle. And it's kind of hard to see on some of it, but you can see better when you come closer. Let's see, I had another one that was really good. Where'd you go? Okay. There. Nope.
How are large? Do they get seasons?
They don't actually around here. So there's bark beetles in particular, like that whole group, mountain pine beetle, Douglas fir beetle. There's also a spruce beetle. There's a western pine beetle that's just decimating the ponderosa pine forest down in California. They are like a canary in the coal mine for climate change all over the world. These beetles are just taking off. Balsam fir beetle is one that's kind of close to my heart. These are your giant subalpine firs. They used to, you know, kill a tree here and there. Now they're taking out all of the balsam fir in the subalpine. If you go to Whitewater and you see all the red trees, you should, this is my personal, if you go to Whitewater and you see red trees, they have some spruce beetle, but they have a balsam fir beetle outbreak, and they are not doing anything about it. And I would really love them to do something about it, or at least try to mitigate the stress that they are putting on their forests. They really make a big deal about being ecologically, they want to be sustainable and all this stuff. If they want to really be that way, they need to start looking after the forest and respecting that it's an ecosystem. I say this as somebody who works there as a ski instructor, but you know, if you're concerned about the forests up there, maybe you could be like, hey, why are all your trees dying? Do me a favor. So anyway, so basically you can come up and take a closer look, but you've got with Douglas fir beetle, it's got what's called a long, I can't remember the word. Sorry, I'm still post-concussion. It's not a nuptial gallery, but it's got one big long gallery in the middle, and the female basically enters, she gets mated, and then she travels along this big long vertical gallery and lays eggs. And then each place that there's an egg, a little larvae hatches and it eats its way out. So you basically end up with one long gallery and then the stands on either side. So you can come take a closer look at that after. Yes, let's do that. This one is pretty good. There you go. So that is very distinctive of Douglas fir beetle. So mountain pine beetle is going to have another one. Balsam fir beetle has a different one. You know, obviously they attack different trees too. So wood borers. Wood borers are snaky. They got these big giant galleries. So yeah, very serpentine. These are big insects. These are powerful flyers. So there may have been Douglas fir beetle in this tree, but this just obliterated anything. I dug into some trees over there that had been killed by Douglas fir beetle. I know they were killed by Douglas fir beetle. I cannot find any galleries. I only see borer. So this is one that's a little bit harder to pass around, but do we want to try it anyway? Just go like this. Okay. I think you can see it pretty good, but give it a try.
Wood chips from wherever
Yeah.
onto your property.
Wood chips are generally fine, but smaller. Yeah, wood chips are, it has to be quite small for the bark beetle, like for the bark beetle to not survive. Like if you're chipping your bark, right? It's like under 1/4 of an inch the chips need to be. They desiccate pretty fast, but they can survive in wood chips. It's not optimal. They need moisture. So an important thing is once a tree is killed, right? So now you've got a dead tree, it died over the fall, it died over the winter, you know, turned red. Those beetles are going to fly in April to August. There are 2 flights. And then by the fall of the next year, that tree is empty. There is not really any point to take it down unless it's safety. It's already, the beetles are gone. The only reason to like remove these trees specifically is to reduce the population, active population of beetles. So the Ministry of Forests, who I trap for, they do a lot of large scale trapping and whatnot for Douglas fir beetle and now starting for wood borer at fires. Their primary method other than trapping is logging. It's just clear the forest. They actually do preventative, they call it preventative sanitation, where they will log a perfectly healthy but susceptible forest that is next door to an infestation. Logging and disturbance can create more infestation. It can be useful. You have an infestation, you want to remove a core of those trees so that the trees nearby do not get infested. That is fair. But when you're removing whole forests and then you're also just creating disturbance around the edge of it, and then all the trees that are left just die. Like I've seen it over and over again. They'll leave 15 leaf trees. They're all dead within 3 years. So that's not working, right? So I'm not against what is called sanitation harvesting, but like preventative sanitation harvesting of healthy stands and doing quite careless logging, in my opinion, of areas that are infested. It needs to be done carefully because otherwise you can make the infestation worse. So
How come we're not hearing about this all the time?
I don't know. I think the fires really, fires are much more immediate and devastating and more visible. It's like the insects are kind of like the fire after the fire. It's a lot more slow moving.
I mean, it would be really good information for the homeowners.
I'm very grateful that I've been given space to talk about it today. It is something that I definitely want to start putting out there more. This is my specialty. That's all I can really offer. I wish that the Ministry of Forests was doing more active stuff to educate people on what this is. I'll come by people's houses in like the Okanagan and all their trees are dead and they don't know why. And I'm just like knock on their door and I'm just like, hi, this is what's happening. And they haven't heard anything and they don't know because they haven't called an arborist, right? So yeah, tell your friends. And I personally am going to try and do more education stuff because I like to.
People like you, are you it?
There's not a lot. Like there's the regional entomologists who work for the research wing of the Ministry of Forests who are actually really, really wonderful ladies. I almost became one of them, but I was like, I didn't want to move to the Caribou, and it was a mistake because it's really cool up there. But yeah, there's like regional entomologists. One is Lorraine out of the Thompson Okanagan, Lorraine McLaughlin. She's an incredible resource. And then Marnie Duthie Holt out of the Kootenay Boundary. She's out of Cranbrook. She's absolutely wonderful too. She wrote the book on like tree-killing insects that we all use for references as entomologists. There's entomologists around. I don't know that there's that many in our area. So, but there's the Ministry of Forest has stewardship foresters and whatnot, and they deal with Douglas fir beetle. You don't necessarily need to be an entomologist. It's not rocket science, this particular aspect of it, but those people they're the ones who are actively doing the research around this stuff for the most part. So yeah,
Nice.
yes, yeah. So it's trees and bugs is kind of me. And then the disease, you can just stick it there. So the disease aspect is another part that I haven't really talked about too much in here. Yep.
That green patch.
Yes. Yep.
Exactly how that would.
So, oh yeah, okay. So MCH. So yeah, MCH, this is the pheromone that the male Douglas fir beetles give off when the tree is full. This says tree's full, don't come here. It is not 100%. If you have a lot of beetles, trees can still die. Do not think that this is like a miracle thing. It works quite good, but there's some thought too that if you do a grid, these beetles don't fly that far. There is some thought that it may actually cause them to fly around so much that they reduce their mating success. So you can have potentially lower populations just by doing like a big grid in areas, potentially. So 1 second. They just generally fly like to the next tree.
So, but how far?
Oh, how far? They can, okay, so they can go kilometers if they're picked up in the wind, but they generally go between 200 to 300 meters. Yeah, whereas the wood borers can fly like a kilometer. They're like really strong flyers. So MCH, it's not toxic. You know, obviously don't want a kid to eat it or something, so you want to put it in a little bit unobtrusive area. You put it on the north side of the tree, you staple it to the tree with a nice, the big long, you know, staples. You put it up as high as you can. 2 meters is generally thought of as adequate, but if you can get it higher, that is better. And the bigger the tree, the more patches you want to put on it. It's Synergy Semiochemicals. I've got some brochures over there that are from the Ministry of Forest, but I can write down Synergy Semiochemicals on there, and it's $4.50 a package in general. So, and you put it on in the spring before the beetles fly, and then you can just leave that up. And then the next year you got to do it again. Doesn't last forever. So that's kind of it. And if you miss it, you can do individual trees. If you love your tree that's right next to your house and you just don't want the beetle to attack that tree, or you can do a grid, which is what we did here. So, and I've seen a lot of success like in areas like this where we've done MCH, tree removal, and sometimes trapping. Out in Kanaka Bar, which is like south of Lytton where they've had big fires, we've done all 3 of those things, and we've really been really successful at reducing the Douglas fir beetle populations there. But we've got the same problem with wood borers now because they're having a huge post-fire issues. So we're going to trap there. And hopefully we'll have more information to pass on to homeowners. That's an option, yes?
What kind of beetles would be in larch? Because when I get larch fire, where there's the galleries, and I've seen some of those sort of worms on them.
There might be wood borers. You might also have other little like bark beetles that are not tree killers. So there's all sorts of like bugs that will live in the trees that are not primary tree killers, but can coexist with the trees or come in after the trees are dead, and will like do lots of really pretty like engraving, like light little ones. There's lots and lots of stuff that it could be. If you want, you can send me pictures, and then I generally can ID stuff. So I can put my contact on the brochures. So take those brochures with a grain of salt. They were done a few years ago, and they are from the Ministry of Forest. So they are like sanitation logging, you know, it talks about that. So but they are good information, and it's got some pictures that you can take home with you. So
Bring a log truck, a load of logs home, and then fly, and you're loads of bugs, correct?
yes. So that's a lovely one too. So they are actively logging infested stands. If they're moving the wood in the winter, it's generally not a problem when they're flying, right? So there's actually restrictions on movement of Douglas fir in some areas during the flight. It's not as common as I thought. They have this idea that if they score the log, you see the Douglas fir is often the bark is like kind of stripped off at half acidly. That is thought to keep the beetles from going. It's not necessarily true. The beetles can live, as I said, in like bigger wood chips and whatnot. They can also live in like slabs. so they can survive on a slab. They can survive in firewood. So they are going to be able to live in those trees. Once they are milled, like they're at the mill and they're milled, those beetles will be destroyed. But if you go to, say, like the mill that was in by Midway, you could see that they had a Douglas fir beetle infestation just all right around. So a lot of mills will trap for borers because it damages their wood, and they are now trapping for Douglas fir beetle as well. But that does not stop it from being transported along with the trucks. So, yeah. So when they're flying, they're flying. So it's not something that is dealt with properly, in my opinion.
And then it comes to your property, and now you got a neighbor infestation.
Yeah.
First down.
Yeah. My only thing is, it's at least a temporary that it's moving by. It's not, at least you're not getting the point source of like you have an infested tree and it's now moving to your tree. This logging truck is transient, so you're not getting a huge amount of beetles necessarily. Your chance of getting enough beetles from that logging truck in your particular point location is probably fairly low, unless they're all mass leaving at once. So I'm sorry to not be more cheerful. It's very, yes, yeah. So I'd love to if people are still interested, I'd love to show a couple things out in the forest. There's one last thing I wanted to show here, though, so we can just pass this around. This is a flathead borer. So this is what is killing the trees here. This is hard to trap for. The round-headed borers, these are the big grubs. People use them for ice fishing. They are the longhorn beetles. Those ones are easier to trap for. I haven't found those here. I've just been finding the little flathead borers, the jewel beetles. These will live in the tree for a couple years. So we're gonna try and trap. We're doing tree removal. We're trying to do some trap trees, and hopefully we can get this under control. But it is a wild card. We don't know a lot about even what specific species this is. So I was talking to Marnie, who's one of the regional entomologists, and she called this the new normal for these beetles and suspects that this is kind of here to stay. But we also don't know that. So yeah, so you can just see it. The thing about these is you take off the bark, they dry out and they die. So, and they're not, as much as we don't want them killing our trees, these are not enemies. These are parts of ecosystems that were beneficial for ages and ages and ages. I kill a lot of bugs. It makes me really sad because I really, really love bugs, but I also love trees. So yeah, just even though they're like the killers of trees, just like still loving them. So yeah.
I just wanted to say, we've been working on the problem on this property for 3 years. This is our 3rd year now. So the first year, we just got in, we didn't know what to do. We ended up fucking up those trees and sadly just burning them up in big bonfires. So what we've done the last 2 years is we've used the mill to strip off the bark, burn the bark pieces. Then we're able to set the wood aside and preserve the wood for milling at a later date. So I just wanted to say, for those of you who have infestations on your property and you don't want to just have to burn up really good wood, and maybe you'll need lumber at some point, or have lumber that you want to put on the market or give to other people who have projects. We can talk about bringing the mill to your property and you being able to preserve through your mitigation without having to just waste all that wood. Even if you have to strip it and you want to save it for firewood on your property, you're not just letting the wood go to waste and having to get rid of it all at once. And so it's a process, like Rosie says, of learning and finding those steps that work for us as people who are responsible for property and for trees. And we used to have an underground spring that ran right through here, went all the way to the Slocan River, and we had live springs down coming out at the river. Those springs don't exist anymore. So that's part of the development that happens. These springs get dried up that used to water all these trees and create a healthy forest. We no longer have those little underground springs alive and well on our property. And so, yeah, if we have to pull water up and let water be part of the solution, then that's kind of what we have to do, because we've taken away nature and the land's own way of dealing with those issues. And when you've been on property for a period of years, you can see those differences taking place as you survive another year. Oh, geez, that spring's gone now. Oh, my plants are different. This land used to be covered with wild ginger. No longer. When this was a true interior boreal rainforest, every morning we had mist here. Every evening we had mist here. That's all moved north. We don't have those rainforest qualities that are keeping our trees the way they were kept prior to this new climate reality. So I think we're suffering a lot because that rainforest has left us. We're no longer part of that. And even though we say we are, truly we're not. And those of us who've been here and have seen those differences in what happens here every day, I'd get up and it would be misting. It was lovely. It would last a little while. The sun had come out. No more. Not one time would you wake up and get that mist, or before you go to bed, get that little bit of fog that rolls through and brings that mist and moves on. But it's here, and it was here every single day. It's no longer.
Is that wild ginger still around?
No, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's totally, so you can notice your ground cover, your ground plants will totally change too. So we used to have this whole place was covered with wild ginger. There's not one wild ginger.
Wow.
on property.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Oh no, I just wanted to add what we were saying, but water is at the heart of all of this. Water is at the heart of all of this. And sadly, the conditions that challenge trees the most are the conditions that these insects love the most. So the hotter, the drier, it actually speeds up their reproductive cycle. They can, like in areas that are hotter and drier, so western pine beetle, which is the one that's killing the ponderosa pine down in California and is moving up, they have in warmer areas, they can have 2, 3, or even 4 life cycles in a year. Versus like up here, when you have western pine beetle, it's like 1 life cycle. So the warmer and drier it gets, it can really, unfortunately, it can really promote the growth of these populations, which is sad because in other bugs, like say, like a lot of our other pollinators and whatnot, the same kind of conditions can actually, like our bugs that metamorphosize and stuff like that, it can actually cause those bugs to not be able to find their host. You have mistimings, you have too hot or dry conditions, and they're not able to survive. So conservation issues with lots of other insects because of the heat and dry, but for these bugs, they love it. So yeah, if anybody would like to come take a look, I can show you some other signs of wood borer and Douglas fir beetle that you can look at when you are on your property, so that you can confirm things.
And we have supposedly we have government people who are supposed to be helping us and taking care of helping us take care of our property. We asked RDCK. Guess what they did? Nothing. Guess what they're doing now? Nothing. But the more people who challenge them to do something, help us get these pheromone packets, help us take care of our property. This is an issue here. Maybe they'll begin responding if it's just one person bugging them to do their job. They don't think they have to do it. But I think the more and more people are educated and aware, and ask for help, maybe people like RDCK will step up to the plate and start doing what they need to do. Those pheromone packets, financially, you know, we
lot.
can afford a few, but we had to do fundraising to be able to continue to do the work to mitigate this problem on this piece of property. If somebody has a property this big and you're spending $1,500 a year just on pheromone packets, let alone doing the labor and all those other things, it's a big job. And that's where RDCK and the other service people should be stepping in and helping us. And sometimes it just takes somebody who gets in there, does the job, makes people aware, then we can start getting services that we're entitled to and that we do pay for, by the way.
Somebody from Autonomous Sinixt can put the name of people we can write to. RDCK.
I think any RDCK representative, I think any government representative, I mean, to be quite honest, I think the government is functioning to manage us to extinction. And they're going to manage us to extinction through extincting everything else. And that's our caribou, our fisheries, they're going to poison our water. They're doing none of those things. So unless we challenge them, unless we say no, and it's not just certain sects of a community that is saying no, then we're going to start getting the responses that we're asking for. But governments aren't doing it. And that's a sad bit, but it's the reality. And reaching out, if you've got an issue, reaching out and learning more. I mean, none of us are ecologists. None of us are foresters. None of us, you know, maybe a few of us are, but knowing who to call and continue to call and continue to do the work. And just, it's amazing calling for a work party.
So many people.
Getting people to respond and say, you know, hey, we've got this issue on our property and we're going to have a work day and could we have some help? Also is part of community response, and I really believe in that. I really believe in community response, community. So thank you.
Yep. And one more thing on that note, I know I can be a real doom and gloom. Like it's pretty, my talks, I can just see people get more and more crestfallen. The thing about this, if you get a tree that's died, like especially with the Douglas fir beetle, it doesn't mean that all your trees are dying. This is not like mountain pine beetle where just all of a sudden all your trees are dead. Right? Like the Douglas fir beetle will, like, you'll have one tree that's attacked. At most you might get a few the next year. Right? Like, and then maybe the next year after that, though, now it's a bigger problem, or it might just die out. Like, you just don't know necessarily. The drier your land is, the more stressed those trees are, the worse problem it is. The borers are a little bit of a new thing. They do seem to be able to just like move in and kill trees really quick. So that's a little bit more upsetting. The woodpeckers are doing a good job sometimes of not killing the trees while they're removing the borers, and they're having a field day, so we're probably gonna have a lot of woodpeckers. But you know, sometimes then they come in when there's a big infestation on that tree and they just strip the bark within, like, it can happen within a few days. Like, it happens so fast. And so that's, but you might not have any wood borer left in that tree to come and infest the next tree. So that's the good news, but we just don't know a lot with that. So, okay.
Sometimes you see lumber mills if they're watering their log piles.
Yes.
To prevent borers.
That, I think, is mostly for burn. Like it's just it's keeping it so that they don't catch on fire. I don't think it's that. They mostly trap for wood borers, and it's actually from the lumber yards that a lot of that is why we have these pheromones that attract wood borers, because there was no reason to like trap them in the wild. They're just decomposers. They're great, right? But lumber people, they don't like it because it makes holes in their wood. So that's why there was pheromones.
The slower they dry, the less likely they are to check them at the end.
Yeah.
They lose less lumber by keeping it and let it dry slowly. And
Oh yeah, thank you, thank you. Yeah.
that's all.
Okay. Do you want to add anything?
I don't know, just any homeowners need support around their
Yes.
properties, like
This man.
boots on the ground, making any of this happen, milling or other trees, irrigation systems, like to keep the trees happy. That's what we're working on here, is to get water for the structures and for the trees.
Yeah.
Those are key. And soil decompaction, if you have trees around your house, even driving around and they're starting to fade from the top down, it's possible to decompact the soil around
Awesome.
them. So there's lots of solutions. So if you need someone to look at it, someone to do it, you may call.
Oh, it fell.
Oh, what was it? Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
this man is masterminding the bringing water in, right? So, and then also has been taking down the trees and is doing all this. So it's absolutely, yeah, we've been working together. It's great. So, yeah. Any other questions, or do you want to go take a little walk to just look at a few more signs if people want to come take a look? Okay.